It's pretty clear that what the Giants need more than anything is impact talent to come up from their farm system. But unfortunately for them, according to FanGraphs at least, their farm system is below average. And why is it below average? Because it's lacking in impact talent.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide episodes 3 days a week for now, back to 5 at some point in February after spring training gets started, which is pretty soon, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, been hosting this show since prior to the 2019 season, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And where we get started is by, like I said, discussing the FanGraphs write-up of the Giants farm system, which is something they do every year, and I'm sure have talked about it every year. And key point to make before we jump into it is that there have been a lot of what we call graduations, which is like players like Patrick Bailey and even Marco Luciano and Luis Matos losing their rookie eligibility, so they're no longer part of the quote-unquote farm system, even if like Luciano and Matos haven't fully established themselves yet. And so they rank it based on only players who are rookie eligible. And so that's just something to keep in mind. But without further delay, let's just get into the write-up, which is just a few paragraphs. And then we're going to go player by player, possibly finding some exceptions to the rule here. But overall, the system overview goes as follows. Quote, "There has been a changing of the guard atop the Giants baseball ops department, as former catcher and franchise icon Buster Posey was named president at the end of September. As Posey gets traction in his role, sounds like he had a head start," and that's referring to the Matt Chapman extension, "and puts his fingerprints not only on the roster but on the front office. San Francisco's acquisition tastes and trends might look less like the ones that built this farm system and more like the Brian Sabean era Giants." They continue, quote, "This is a below-average farm system, most efficient in impact prospects, with just 10 players with a 40-plus future value grade or better." And by the way, this is Ben interjecting. We'll get into what future value is, the 20 to 80 scouting scale, a little bit later, probably right after we read this. But continuing, quote, "By far the best aspect of this system is how much big league ready pitching it has. San Francisco's 40-man is chock full of first and second year arms who have multiple option years left. With an aging Justin Verlander joining the injury-prone Jordan Hicks and Robbie Ray in their projected rotation, the Giants are built to handle multiple injuries. The wheels won't fall off due to a lack of depth. Conversely, the system lacks any kind of near-ready major league hitter. Bryce Eldridge has just a couple of weeks of experience above A-ball, and he's a bad defender, so one shouldn't assume he's fully baked. Players who aren't, quote, rookies anymore, but also aren't established big leaguers, Luis Matos, Marco Luciano, who lost rookie eligibility in 2024 on active roster days, and Casey Schmidt are the ones to watch and hope for improvement. Of that group, I think Matos has the best chance to be a good player, and I still think he will become one. Under Posey, will this club remain hyper-focused on drafting pitchers with low release heights? Will it continue to assign SEC shortstops to San Jose or target very small school hitters late in the draft? These are questions that will be answered by paying attention to the marginal transactions and late picks the Giants make over the next year. So that's the write-up. So below average system, but, mentions, like I said, Matos, Luciano, and Schmidt, and also that they've got a lot of, he says by far the best aspect of this system is how much big league ready pitching it has. And so that's why we've talked about, hey, if you want to add, if you're not going to spend money on like an Alex Bregman or whatever, you've got some arms you could trade away for a hitter. And later on, at some point, whether it's this week or next, MLB Trade Rumors put out a top 20 trade candidates, and I want to just go through them and see who the fits are for the Giants and if there's a possible match to be made with one of those teams for one of those players. But anyway, when he says there's just 10 players with a 40-plus future value grade or better, I want to explain what that is before we get into naming the prospects. And by the way, this is done by Eric Longenhagen, who's the lead prospect analyst at FanGraphs. And so on the 20 to 80 scouting scale, 20 is what they call an org guy, which is just a player who like fills out your minor league roster but has no potential really in the major leagues. 30 on the scale, this is for hitters, it's like an up and down player. Like they come up, they get set down, and that's just kind of their career. 40 is a bench player, and they assign like WAR values to these. And a bench player is 0, is like replacement level up to like 0.7 wins above replacement is kind of how they do it. So that's what he's saying. Only 10 players in the system project to be bench players, like replacement level bench players or better. And 45 on the scouting scale is low end regular or platoon player. 50 is an average everyday player. 55 is an above average regular. 60 is an all-star. 70 is top 10 overall player in the game. 80 is top 5 overall player in the game. And again, there's WAR value assigned to these with, I don't know, we'll get into more about this and then for what it means for pitchers too as we go through the list. So the list starts out with Bryce Eldridge. So they, Eric Longenhagen does say there in the write-up that there are no major league ready hitters. And so, throwing some cold water on Bryce Eldridge and pointing out that he is considered to be, and not just considered to be, I haven't watched Bryce Eldridge like at all, except highlights of him hitting homers. But to see him defend on a regular basis is just not something I've done. But scouts have, and hearing that he's clearly been a below average defender is obviously concerning, but we'll see when we get into the write-up on Eldridge that ultimately they don't think that's going to matter that much because of the impact he's likely to make as a hitter. But the thing is, he's not very old. He's 20 years old. So he, like they said, he doesn't have a lot of experience above A ball. And so, how soon he's ready is definitely up for debate, and it depends on how he does to start out this season in the minor league. So we will get into these specific players who make up this list for the Giants. And just the overall downside that comes with having what is considered to be a below average farm system, but also how in the past a lot of players on the Giants who have become really good have been overlooked, like Patrick Bailey and Logan Webb, just as a couple examples. So getting into Bryce Eldridge and the rest of the top 10 and beyond coming up in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me, and I have a few prescriptions I didn't even realize I was paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a professional finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. In the new year, Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is that subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, here we go. We're going to get into Bryce Eldridge and the rest of the Giants prospects who make up what is considered by Eric Longenhagen over at FanGraphs, at least, to be a below-average farm system. So that's one of the major shortcomings of the Farhan Zaidi tenure here, is that in 6 seasons, he failed to put together a farm system that was not even average, right? Like, this is now, like, he leaves with what is considered a below-average farm system. They did draft and graduate some players. Kyle Harrison, also not rookie eligible anymore, so he's not on the list. That's part of the thing. It's like, if you have good players and they become major leaguers, then your farm system rankings can tank. And that's partially what happened with the likes of Harrison, Luciano, Matos, Bailey not being on the list anymore, but they're still young and under team control for a long time. So that's fair to point out, but at the same time, you need a pipeline of talent that's constantly churning out good players. And the Giants' rivals, notably like the Dodgers and the Padres, like, consistently put out much better, and the Diamondbacks, like, in the division, are consistently putting out much better farm systems that are producing better players. So it's critical for the Giants to get where they want to go, is to start having a better pipeline. And right now, it's not in great shape. But the number one prospect for the Giants is Bryce Eldridge, according to Eric Longenhagen of FanGraphs. Eldridge is 6'7". He's 20 years old. And the write-up goes as follows. Eldridge is a human skyscraper at 6'7" and has some of the most exciting raw power projection in all of the minors. So, by the way, the raw power right now, Longenhagen grades as a 60 on the 20 to 80 scouting scale, but says that it's an 80 for future value. So basically, as much raw power as one can possibly have is what they're saying he will have in the future. And so, yeah, that's what he's saying. It's some of the most exciting raw power in all of the minors. In his first full pro season, split pretty evenly between low and high A, he hit 289, 372 on base, 513 slugging with 23 home runs. Then the Giants gave him the 2 model jobbing promotions to AA Richmond and AAA Sacramento. Eldridge played fewer than 10 games at each stop before he was sent to the Arizona Fall League, where he looked absolutely exhausted, especially on defense. Eldridge is going to have enormous power in the Matt Olson, Adam Dunn zip code one day. He already has plus raw power, 111 mile an hour max exit velocity, 106 mile per hour top 90th percentile exit velocity, 56% hard hit rate in 2024, and still has a ton of room on his frame for mass and strength. Anytime a hitter this size comes along, there are justifiable doubts about whether or not he'll be able to catch up to big league velocity. And while Eldridge is definitely going to have elevated strikeouts throughout his career, he also has a remarkably short swing for a hitter his size, and he has shown an ability to move the barrel around the zone. He still had more swings and misses than balls in play in 2024, which is often a scary indicator, but while his contact metrics are a full standard deviation below the big league average, 16% swinging strike rate, 77% in-zone contact, 67% overall, there's just too much playable power here to fret over that. Where Eldridge needs to improve before he dons a big league uniform is on defense. It's no doubt exhausting for a guy this size to bend and get deep into his lower body all summer, but by the end of the year, Eldridge was playing first base with such a high center of gravity that it often cost his team outs. There are times when he fails to stretch enough on a bang-bang play or comes off the bag entirely because he can't stretch enough. And this happens way more often than is acceptable at the big league level. Eldridge doesn't have to be doing the splits at first to be a fine defender, but he definitely needs to learn how to hold the bag better. The Giants have tried him in right field. Eldridge was also a marginal pitching prospect in high school, but his arm would play there in right field, but not at all in 2024. He seems like a first base only prospect now. This guy is going to be a middle of the order force, so it doesn't really matter where he plays, and it barely matters how good a defender he becomes, but it's the aspect of his game that needs the most help right now. It's plausible Eldridge will be up late in 2025, late enough for him to retain rookie eligibility entering 2026. Like your balsa wood bridge from shop class, if Eldridge's hit tool can pass the test of upper-level pitching, he'll be a top 10 prospect by that time. So apologies for the long read there, but I thought, it was really worth that comprehensive look at Bryce Eldridge and essentially saying if he can just hit, the hit tool, meaning, not striking out 35% of the time, hitting for a decent batting average in the upper level minors and just continuing to mash for power, which is something they don't have any concerns about, saying he'll be a top 10 prospect in baseball. So that's the good news. And, to say it's a below average farm system, sometimes all you need is like a couple impact players. And by the sounds of it, Eldridge has the potential very much so to be that. I wasn't really aware of these defensive issues until reading this because, like I said, I haven't watched him. I don't watch a lot of minor league baseball, something I do sometimes, but to be honest, like the cameras are not high definition and it's just not a great production. And so it can be a little tough, especially when you have to watch not have to, but for me, I'm watching every Major League Giants game. So the minor league games are a little tough to add on top of that. So anyway, that's good that you've got a player like this in your system. He's only 20 years old, and so there's time for him to improve. And, if he can, even if it takes him 2 years to get up, he'll still be extremely young. And the consensus, this is not the first time I've seen this, is that this guy is really going to hit. And you read a sentence like, what did they say? This guy is going to be a middle of the order force. So that's what the Giants need. Left-handed hitter, by the way, huge, 6'7", very young. Like I said, right-handed thrower, was the Giants' first-round draft pick, 16th overall in 2023. So 2 years ago. And so, the Giants, they've gotten a lot of flack for their first-round picks under the Farhan Zaidi era and regime. But when you look at it now, Patrick Bailey has turned into a very good player, even though he hasn't hit very well. He hit well in the first half. I was looking back at his season recently, and he was doing really well in the first half offensively, and then he just tanked. But he did come back towards the end of the year and get back to hitting okay. But also Bryce Eldridge now. We don't know what he's going to become, but to say he's going to be a middle of the order force and it doesn't even matter if he has, it's kind of like Pete Alonso, right? It doesn't really matter that Pete Alonso is a bad defender. It kind of does. It's affecting his free agency right now, but he's still an impact middle of the order force. I'm not saying Eldridge comps to Pete Alonso because they're very different. One's right-handed, one's left-handed, but watching Bryce Eldridge's progression this season, seeing how he does defensively, reading about it, watching it, and seeing where he starts the season. Will he start in AAA, AA? It's going to be very interesting, and when he gets called up, it's going to be very interesting to watch as well. And this is one to hold on to, a player that you shouldn't trade, and there were reports that the Giants really tried to get Garrett Crochet from the White Sox, left-handed pitcher, ace arm, and they tried to acquire Kyle Tucker from the Astros, who eventually was traded to the Cubs. And in both of those conversations, the teams basically said it's got to be Bryce Eldridge coming back, which shows you what the industry thinks of him, first of all, wanting him and only him. I mean, not necessarily only him, but that he's the guy that they asked for impact players like Kyle Tucker and Garrett Crochet. But the Giants, I think, rightfully said no, especially when you're talking about a Kyle Tucker who's only under contract for one season. So this would be dumb for the Giants to trade Bryce Eldridge for a rental player. Unless you can guarantee yourself an extension with a Kyle Tucker, then maybe it changes the equation. But where the Giants are, they need players like Eldridge to become impact players and be under team control for a long time for them to contend. So this team is not in a great state right now, and a lot of it does have to do with the farm system being fringe, and by Longenhagen's account, just frankly below average. So we'll continue looking through these prospects and find who's interesting and worth paying attention to in just a minute, now that we've discussed Bryce Eldridge. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you in part by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. I'm on FanDuel.com right now and looking at the NFL playoff odds, and also, just that offer of betting $5, and if you win, I'm just looking for the most lopsided odds I can find, betting that $5 and then trying to get that $300 in bonus bet. So make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, here we go. We are going to get into other prospects who are worth paying attention to and knowing about. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. Coming up later this week, we're going to have 2 more episodes. We've got a lot we can get into. Mailbag questions, the top 20 trade candidates, like I said, on MLB Trade Rumors. I think that's really worth getting into because we're close to spring training here, and I think the Giants are probably trying to do a little more than what they've done so far. Even though they've signed a couple players, I think there's still work to be done, and the trade route may be the most realistic route. So there's that. There's this talk about a salary cap, and if MLB Trade Rumors ran a poll, would you trade the 2027 season for a salary cap? And just assume that also means a salary cap and a salary floor. So that's a very spicy topic. So a lot coming up later on in the week. But moving along, the number 2 prospect, by the way, Bryce Eldridge has a 55 future value grade by Eric Longenhagen. So when we look at the 20 to 80 scouting scale for hitters, 55 is above average regular. It's below all-star. So it's 2.5 to 3.3 WAR. And that's a little bit disappointing. I'd like to see him in the 60. I think if he improves his defense, then you put him in that 60 category based on what I'm reading here. It sounds like he's really going to hit. So if he's a good defender, or at least average defensively, put him in that all-star category potentially. But obviously I'm biased and I haven't even seen him defend, so I can't say if I think that'll happen. So anyway, the next tier is 50 future value, and there's only one player in the 50 future value, and then it drops down to 45 plus. So 50, and it's a pitcher, it's Carson Wisenhunt. And for pitchers, 50 is number 4 starters, approximately a 4 fielding independent pitching, at times worse, but then with lots of innings. And the WAR breakdown is roughly 1.8 to 2.5. So that's what he's saying. It's like, this isn't exciting here. But what is exciting is that the scouting scale by Longenhagen has Carson Wisenhunt's changeup as currently an 80, which is the best it can be, and a future value of 80. So basically the best, as good of a changeup as one can have. And that's what the write-up says. It says, what kind of role can Wisenhunt's all-world changeup carry him to if the rest of his skill set is just okay? Though Wisenhunt has improved in a few key areas, his strike throwing is still on the fringe of what tends to be viable for a big league starter. His walk rate improved quite a bit in the second half of 2024 from 12.3 to 9.8, but was still worse than all but 8 major league starters who worked at least 120 innings last year. There are encouraging signs here, though. Wisenhunt held his usual velocity all year, even though he exceeded 100 innings for the first time. And just skipping a few lines for the sake of time, quote, most importantly, he has an elite pitch. His changeup is good in any count. Hitters can know it's coming and still be fooled by it. It has generated elite miss rates for multiple seasons, including against AAA hitters in 2024. A Devin Williams type of outcome would be plausible for Wisenhunt should he prove unable to start. He stands a good shot to debut late in 2025 and compete for an opening day roster spot in 2026. So Devin Williams is like arguably the best closer in baseball with an elite pitch, the airbender changeup. And so I don't know. I mean, yeah, relievers aren't the most valuable commodities out there, but just to have a guy who has something that's so elite, it's kind of similar to Eldridge. If Wisenhunt can improve in other areas, then you're looking at something much better than 50 future value. But a Devin Williams type of outcome wouldn't be bad. That's not a bad thing. So that's just worth, Wisenhunt is definitely a guy to watch. So the next player is someone the Giants just acquired. Number 3 is Josuar De Jesus Gonzalez, who the Giants just signed out of the Dominican Republic. He is 17 years old, and he was considered the best non-Roki Sasaki international prospect this signing period. So Longenhagen writes, De Jesus Gonzalez is a potential 5-tool player who was my top non-Roki Sasaki player in the 2025 International Amateur class. A switch-hitting shortstop, De Jesus Gonzalez is an explosive rotator with electric bat speed. He unwinds with rare verve, and the bend in his lower body allows for low ball power. His right-handed swing is less coordinated but still dangerous. De Jesus Gonzalez's medium frame limits his raw power projection somewhat, but there's enough bat speed to project above average pop. His front side can drift towards first base, suggesting potential breaking ball vulnerability. Otherwise, he looks like a good hitter with playable power in a lot of the zone. The twitch, range, actions, and arm for shortstop are all present, and he's universally acclaimed as a lock to stick at short by scouts who have seen him there. Others have seen him work out in center field and thought that was a good fit too. Josuar is a very strong heuristic profile, as a switch-hitting, up-the-middle player with power, and he has all-star ceiling if his hit tool is average or better. So that's where the 45-plus comes into play. That I don't even entirely understand. Someone I'm sure will explain it to me in like a tweet or something. Basically, my understanding is that they're like hedging that basically it's going to go up. If he's so young, 17, basically they need to see more. And if it does, they believe that future value of 45 is going to rise. So I don't know. I'm seeing positives here with the top 3 players certainly on this list, but then it gets into the rest of the list, and that's where you start to see that it's not that deep of a farm system in terms of hitters especially. So number 4 is James Tibbs III, who was a Giants first-round pick this year, or 2024, I should say. They give him a future value of 45 and say he looks like a good platoon outfielder with medium physical tools. Trevor McDonald, a starting pitcher, is number 5 on the list, and they say over time McDonald should establish himself as a grounder getting number 4 or 5 starter. And then So those are 45 future value prospects, Tibbs and McDonald. And then it's just 40 plus future value. Carson Seymour says he lacks the repertoire depth of a typical starter, but has nasty, unique-looking stuff that should allow him to play a very effective long relief role. And Joe Whitman, Giants second-round pick in 2023. And basically, he is a left-handed arm. There's a lot to kind of read about his arsenal here and the variance, I guess I would say, of his future and what kind of player he'll be. But basically he says his side, limited college innings, and small school background are indicators that velo and pitch progression will occur, but right now he looks like a number 5 starter. This grade acknowledges that reality while also providing some room for helium around the changeup. So basically there's a hedge here. Again, 40 plus is the future value on the 20 to 80 scouting scale. So that plus being, it could go up, right? The helium is what he's talking about. Next, Johnny Level at number 8. He was an international signee from 2024. And the final kind of line is things are off to an encouraging start. Level should be stateside in 2025 and could finish the season as a teenager in full season ball. And so he's 17 years old and 40 plus is the grade. And then Rainer Arias is 40 plus as well. And the final write-up is that he basically says he could have special power at peak and be a Tyler O'Neill type of hitter. Even if his strikeout issues persist, it's frustrating that Arias's career has yet to truly get off the ground, and it will be a problem for his prospect standing if he looks healthy in 2025, but still runs a 68% contact rate. But I still value his upside enough to grade him like a second-round high school prospect. And then finally, Reggie Crawford at number 10. This was the Giants' first-round pick in 2022, and he's been injured, but the final line is when he's really humming, Crawford looks like a future closer in the Jose Alvarado mold. He powers sinkers past hitters all over the zone and flashes a ridiculous mid-80s slider. Crawford's delivery is pretty violent. He's a tightly wound, bulky sort of athlete, and he doesn't repeat his release consistently, even though he has a viable third pitch. His changeup is fine. He was always likely to be a reliever because of these issues. Now he's had 2 major injuries and surgeries in a span of about 2.5 years. It creates volatility and delay that alters the way Crawford is, quote, valued as a prospect, even though his evaluation hasn't changed. Hopefully he returns with his pre-injury stuff. If he does, we could see him in San Francisco sometime in 2026. So Carson Ragsdale, Mason Black, and others kind of round out this list, but Wade Meckler is on the 40-man roster. He comes in at number 17 with a 50 future value. So anyway, that's the write-up of the Giants farm system. And importantly, I just think they need those guys with the pluses basically to elevate themselves. And that's it. And they need guys like who graduated but haven't yet established themselves as studs, like Kyle Harrison, Luciano, Matos, Casey Schmidt. They need like 1 or 2 of those guys to really become good players, and for some of their young players on this list to develop more and become really good, and like Eldridge to improve his defense or whatever. And so, yeah. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. Helps me out a ton, so thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again 2 more times this week. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.